What does a hero look like? Oftentimes, we imagine heroes as super warriors. They are confronted with dangerous threats to their homeworld, and they need to defend all that is good against malevolent supervillains. Daniel is a hero, but he is not a warrior. To the contrary, whatever violence the villains in his story commit against Daniel and his people, he never responds in kind. Mahatma Gandhi, the nonviolent hero from India, who read the Bible thoroughly and greatly admired Jesus' work as a peacemaker. Gandhi also admired Daniel as an early example of a hero who stands firmly for what he believes in nonviolent ways. When we meet Daniel, he is a displaced person. He used to be a young man of importance and nobility in the kingdom of Judah, the Jewish kingdom in the south. But now, King Nebuchadnezzar has conquered Judah, and many of the Judeans have been brought to Babylon as prisoners of war. Daniel and 3 others have been chosen to serve at the king's court after a thorough education in all things Babylonian. To mark that transition into their new identity, the conquerors rename all of them. Their Jewish names are exchanged with the Babylonian ones. Goodbye, Daniel. Hello, Belteshazzar. Now, as we know, the book is called Daniel, not Belteshazzar, so we know how the people of Israel remember their hero. But what made him worthy of remembrance? How could he, a prisoner of war, become a symbol of resistance for his people? How could he, a mere servant, make a stand against the absolute power of Babylonian kings? The Babylonians took the Judean people, their weapons and property, and, the worst sacrilege, they took their religious vessels out of the temple in Jerusalem, and Nebuchadnezzar put them into the house of his God, as a sign that the God of Israel had also been defeated. Daniel is under Nebuchadnezzar's control. His foremost challenge is to find ways to maintain his religious and cultural identity in this situation. He starts with the basics. Eating according to the complex system of biblical food laws is an important expression of Judean faith. Daniel and his friends are not able to prepare the food for themselves, and the meat and wine served at court are not prepared according to Judean law. Therefore, they fast. They only drink water and eat vegetables. They manage to keep their fasting low-key so that the king is not offended. Still, this is an act of resistance and defiance. And for us, the reader, an early sign that the God of Israel has not been defeated, even though the temple is no more. Fasting is a long-standing and effective tool in the toolbox of spiritual warfare and nonviolent resistance. Over history, many spiritual fighters used fasting as a means of resistance, most famously Mahatma Gandhi. In the course of his life, Gandhi fasted 17 times in protest against violence and for justice for the underprivileged. Fasting strengthens Daniel and his friends in their spiritual resolve, and they need their strength as they proceed to serve the king, for King Nebuchadnezzar is not portrayed as a wise, kind, and trustworthy leader. No, far from it. The king is a tyrant. Oftentimes, his orders are impossible to fulfill. He's full of fear and insecurity, and he has a tendency to violent outbursts, which, combined with his absolute powers, often lead to the killing of innocent people. So also on the day when the king makes a giant golden statue and orders all people without exception to worship that statue. When Daniel's friends refuse to worship anything and anybody who's not the king of Israel, the tyrant orders them to be burnt alive. They accept his verdict with the following words, and why don't we all read them together? You remember the green book, the Bible is in front of you. You need to open the Old Testament section, page 846. I'm always lucky, I mark it before the service. And it's Daniel 3, verses 17 to 18. Daniel 3, 17 to 18, page 846 in the Old Testament section. Let us read. If our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire and out of your hand, O king, let him deliver us. But if not, be it known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, and we will not worship the golden statue that you have set up. Thank you. These are impressive words, and indeed the friends are thrown into the flames. God protects Hananiah, now Shadrach, Mishael, now Meshach, and Azariah, now Abednego, in miraculous ways. They are not consumed by the flames, and they survived unharmed. God also protects Daniel later on in a similar situation when he is thrown into the lion's den because he prayed faithfully to God, even though a verdict by the ruler had forbidden prayer to anybody but the ruler himself. The lions do not harm Daniel, and he survives the death sentence. In the time of exile, these dramatic stories of miraculous rescues were stories of resistance and hope in difficult times. The world around the Judeans closed in on them and demanded that they let go of their values, that they let go of their God, and worship the idols of secular power instead. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah stand up for their beliefs. They courageously and peacefully face danger. They are not afraid of suffering and death. Their courage is fed by their deep trust in God. Not trust that God will rescue them no matter what, but trust that God is with them and they with God, whatever happens. This is another lesson in spiritual warfare and nonviolent resistance. Do not be afraid when confronted with violence and abuse of power. Your faith will feed your courage. It will make you strong to resist non-violently. As we well know, when we go over the long list of Christian martyrs and saints, all too many have been thrown into prison and even killed because of their faith, starting with St. Paul and certainly not ending with Martin Luther King Jr. Confrontations in a violent world with misplaced values do not always end as well as they do in the stories of Daniel and his friends. The writers of the book of Daniel are aware of that. A large portion of the book contains visions, apocalyptical visions. The writer confronts the violence in this world, and they lead our imagination to the divine culmination of history, at which time, as we read today, your people shall be delivered. Your people shall be delivered. Here we find one of the very few references to resurrection in the Hebrew Bible. It is the promise that God is with us at all times, also after death, in all eternity. For Daniel, it is crucial to discern God's will in visions and dreams. He is recognized and revered for his ability to interpret dreams and visions of the Babylonian leaders. He also has visions of his own, and God does not reveal the meaning of all of them to Daniel. This is the third lesson in spiritual warfare and nonviolent resistance we can learn in the book of Daniel. Always discern God's will prayerfully. And be aware that God's will is always larger than what you yourself know and deem to be the right course of action. All too often, we equate our own will with God's will, and all too often, we elevate ourselves to be the judges of the world. We are not. God is. It is our work to follow God's great commandment, to love God, self, and neighbor. It is our calling to spread God's love into the world. Sometimes, maybe even often, worldly powers do not wish God's love to reach all people. When this is the case, we learn from Daniel. We remain strong in our faith practices. We do not fear threats of violence, and we resist them non-violently. We keep the vision of God's kingdom alive and follow it consistently. And we trust God at all times. Amen.